I am Kenneth McGriff, better known as Supreme. My journey through the underworld of New York City was marked by power, influence, and the rise and fall of the Notorious Supreme Team. We were a force to be reckoned with, moving thousands of vials of illegal substances and making millions each week. Despite setbacks like getting caught and serving time, I never lost control of my organization, even orchestrating operations from behind bars. When I was finally released, the Supreme Team entered its golden era, dominating the drug trade in New York City like never before. But as the authorities closed in, it became clear that our reign couldn't last forever. Gerald Prince Miller, my second in command, and Princess Vicious methods attracted too much attention, leading to the downfall of over 100 members. After my second stint in prison, I decided to leave the streets behind and venture into the entertainment industry. I co-wrote the script for Crime Partners, a movie featuring hip-hop icons like Ice-T and Snoop Dogg. Alongside Murder, founder of Gotti, I made strides in the music industry, offering him a role as vice president of the record label. Growing up in South Jamaica, Queens, I had a different upbringing compared to many in my line of work. Born into a stable, middle-class family with hard-working parents, I was the middle child, surrounded by love and support. My parents, both city transit workers, instilled values of hard work and dedication in me from an early age. Despite the neighborhood's history as a slum during my childhood, South Jamaica was still a relatively safe and family-friendly place. It had undergone urban transformations, thanks to initiatives like those of President Franklin D. Roosevelt in the 1940s. But despite the opportunities around me, I was drawn to a different path. As I grew older, the allure of the streets became stronger, and I found myself immersed in the world of crime. Eventually, I rose to prominence as the leader of the infamous Supreme Team, a name that would become synonymous with power and danger in New York City. However, my downfall came swiftly, driven by addiction to the street life and the mistakes I made along the way. The fallout with e-moneybags, the hit on 50 cent a euro, these were the actions that ultimately led to my life sentence, currently being served in USP McCreary in Pine Knob, Kentucky. Looking back, I realize now the price I paid for chasing that lifestyle. But the journey from a middle-class upbringing to the heights of organized crime and finally to a prison cell is a story that defines me, for better or worse. As I reflect on my upbringing and the choices that lay before me, the path to college seemed like a narrow corridor leading to a life of monotony and struggle. Growing up in a neighborhood plagued by racialism and systemic oppression, the odds of breaking free from the cycle of blue-collar work seemed slim, even with a degree in hand. But the streets offered a different allure, a promise of power, wealth, and status. In the world I knew, success was measured by the cars we drove, the parties we threw, and the respect we commanded. It was a world where hustlers thrived, where opportunities seemed boundless. So, I made the decision to leave school behind and embrace the life of a hustler. Starting from the bottom, I worked my way up, driven by ambition and a hunger for success. My journey led me to the 5% Heirs, a group whose teachings resonated with me, despite the criminal undertones that lurked within certain factions. In the 70s and 80s, the 5% Heirs wielded significant power in the streets and within the prison system, becoming a force to be reckoned with. And as I immersed myself in this world, I began to see the potential for greatness, for becoming the kingpin I had always aspired to be. The Supreme Team wasn't just a ragtag group of street hustlers. It was structured like a well-oiled machine, with me, Supreme, at the helm and my nephew, Gerald Prince Miller, as my right-hand man. While I handled the business side of things, Prince brought the muscle, ensuring our dominance in the streets. Prince was known for his ruthless methods, but he was fiercely loyal to me and the organization. I, on the other hand, preferred to avoid unnecessary violence, using it only as a last resort to protect our interests and keep law enforcement off our backs. At our peak, we had over 200 members under our command, including some big names like C. Just, Harry Big C. Hunt, and Waverly Teddy Coleman. But it wasn't just about having numbers. We ran a tight ship, operating out of the Baisley Park houses in South Jamaica with elaborate security measures in place to evade the authorities. We had lookouts stationed on nearby buildings, equipped with walkie-talkies to alert us of any threats. And when the heat was on, our security team sprang into action, hiding or destroying any incriminating evidence before the cops could get their hands on it. It was this level of organization and efficiency that kept us one step ahead of the law for so long. In the early 1980s, the Supreme Team was in its prime, moving narcotics at an unprecedented rate. I leveraged my old connections from high school, forging a lucrative partnership with Lorenzo "Fat Cat" Nichols, one of the biggest dealers in NYC at the time. With Fat Cat as our main coke supplier, we operated with little interference from law enforcement, enjoying a golden era of freedom and profit. We worked tirelessly, day and night, selling thousands of vials of coke every week and raking in $500,000 daily. Our success was evident in the flashy cars we drove, the beautiful women who surrounded us, and the extravagant parties we threw. We spared no expense, hiring top-tier rappers like Run DMC and the Beastie Boys to entertain us. But with success came scrutiny. The NYPD began to take notice of our lavish lifestyle, and by 1985, the FBI had us under surveillance, tapping our phones and monitoring our every move. Despite our best efforts to stay under the radar, the eyes of law enforcement were firmly fixed on the Supreme Team, marking the beginning of our downfall. In 1985, the spotlight shone brightly on us, fueled by media frenzy over the growing cocaine epidemic. A robbery at one of our stash houses only intensified matters, leading to a police raid that landed me in Elmira State Prison for 9 years. But even behind bars, my influence loomed large. I entrusted Prince with leading the Supreme Team, and under his command, our operations continued with ruthless efficiency. Upon my release in 1987, I wasted no time in reasserting my authority. With a warm welcome from every member of my crew, I resumed control and laid out my vision for the future. But this time, I wanted more than just profit. We organized community events, sports programs, and music events, showing a different side of the Supreme Team, one that gave back to the neighborhoods we hailed from. Despite our criminal endeavors, we were also pillars of the community, providing opportunities and support where it was needed most. It was a new chapter for the Supreme Team, one where we aimed not just for wealth and power, but for positive impact and lasting legacy. During my time with the 5% heirs, I earned the moniker Supreme, a name that would stick with me throughout my criminal career. It was also during this period that I crossed paths with Lorenzo "Fat Cat" Nichols, a local kingpin whose influence would shape my trajectory. In those days, heroin dominated the streets, and the 5% heirs battled rival gangs for control over the drug trade. But when cocaine began to surge in popularity in the early 1980s, I saw an opportunity to capitalize on a new market. With the epidemic still under the radar of law enforcement and the media, the potential for profit was immense. Drawing on my entrepreneurial instincts, I formed the Supreme Team, a crew that would soon become legendary in New York City's underworld. From our humble beginnings in the 5% heirs, we rose to prominence, dominating every aspect of street and gang life across the boroughs. But with our newfound success came increased scrutiny from the FBI, as we navigated the dangerous waters of the cocaine trade, fighting for power, money, and territory against rival gangs. Despite the risks, I was determined to cement my legacy as the Supreme of the streets. Despite our charitable efforts, illegal operations continued to run rampant within the Supreme Team. Just months after my release from prison, I found myself back behind bars when the NYPD raided another stash house. This time, the judge presiding over my case, Sterling Johnson, handed down a harsh sentence of 12 years for operating a criminal enterprise. Once again, I left Prince in charge of the organization, a decision that would prove to be deadly. Under his leadership, the Supreme Team became even more ruthless, with Prince ordering multiple homicides, including the execution of a young dealer in our own neighborhood. Despite being framed for these crimes, Prince managed to evade conviction due to lack of evidence. But the law eventually caught up with him. While already in jail for one homicide, Prince faced new charges for orchestrating a quadruple homicide of Colombian suppliers. Despite his reputation as Mr. Untouchable in the media, eyewitness testimony finally led to his conviction on a state homicide charge, putting an end to his reign of terror. Although Prince's incarceration dealt a blow to the organization, the Supreme Team's legacy of violence and criminality would live on, casting a long shadow over the streets of Queens. The passing of Officer Edward Byrne in 1988 was a tragic event that shook not only the city but also the entire nation. The outrage it sparked led to a determined crackdown on drug dealers in New York City, with the formation of the Tactical Narcotics Team, TNT, by the NYPD. Despite the efforts to dismantle drug networks, Prince's release in 1989 saw the Supreme Team attempting to regain its former dominance. However, the landscape had changed, and the organization struggled to adapt. The increased scrutiny from law enforcement made it challenging to operate, leading to a decline in profits and influence. By 1990, the law caught up with Prince and several other members of the Supreme Team. Wiretaps and surveillance exposed their criminal activities, resulting in their arrest and the dismantling of the once powerful organization. It was a stark reminder of the consequences of operating outside the law and the relentless pursuit of justice by law enforcement agencies. The Supreme Team had fallen, leaving behind a legacy of crime and tragedy. The wiretap between December 1989 and March 1990 proved to be the undoing of Prince and several other members of the Supreme Team, despite some charges being dropped due to the illegality of the wiretap. Prince was still sentenced to 7 life sentences in 1993, effectively marking the official downfall of the organization in 1995, eventually shifting my focus to the film industry. In 2001, I released Crime Partners, a movie adaptation of Dolan Gone's novel, featuring renowned rappers like Snoop Dogg and Ice-T. Despite allegations of financing the film with illegal proceeds, Crime Partners grossed around $4 million, establishing my reputation in the entertainment world. However, old habits die hard, and I found myself drawn back into the streets, allegedly involved in the distribution of narcotics in New York City. Trouble found me once again when I clashed with Eric Smith, known as E-Moneybags, over a car transaction. Despite Moneybags' change of heart, I refused to refund him, sparking a series of altercations that would once again bring unwanted attention from law enforcement. The feud between E-Moneybags and myself escalated tragically when he sought me out for perceived betrayal. As for myself, I was released on parole after serving 8 years on the Kingpin charge. However, by then, it was clear that continuing with business as usual was no longer an option. Spending my time in prison reading and educating myself, I decided to turn my life around upon my release. That's when I ventured into the entertainment industry, teaming up with Irving Lorenzo Jr., also known as DJ Irv. Together, we founded Murder Incorporated, which would become a major player in the hip-hop scene of New York City. Under DJ Irv's guidance, the label flourished, and I was offered the position of vice president, marking a new chapter in my life beyond the streets. Rejecting the offer from Gotti was a pivotal moment for me, driven by pride and a desire to maintain control over my own destiny. Despite declining the role of vice president, I remained involved with Murder Incorporated. In a misguided attempt to retaliate, Moneybags opened fire, mistakenly hitting my friend Cobra Black just instead of me. Enraged by this act, I put a bounty on Moneybags' head, forcing him to seek alliances with others who shared animosity towards me, including rapper 50 Cent. The animosity between 50 Cent and myself dated back to 2000 when he was stabbed outside a recording studio in New York after an altercation with a Murder Incorporated rapper. Matters worsened when 50 Cent released Ghetto Quran, airing out Hustler's business. which led to accusations of snitching and further fueled my determination to eliminate him. On May 24, 2000, 50 Cent miraculously survived an assassination attempt where he was shot 9 times. Though I was suspected of orchestrating the attack, no concrete evidence was found. Subsequently, the triggerman, Darryl "Hummel" Baum, was assassinated in a gang-related incident. Unrelenting in my pursuit of enemies, I ordered a hit on E-Moneybags in 2001, instructing my hitman to record the incident. On July 16, Moneybags fell victim to the hit as 4 assailants approached his SUV and fired over 40 shots into the vehicle, ending his life. You're correct. Surviving 40 shots is indeed nearly impossible. And tragically, Eric Smith didn't make it. Ordering the hit to be recorded proved to be a grave mistake, as it eventually led to my downfall. In 2007, while residing in Baltimore, Maryland, police discovered the recording during a search of my property. I was charged with conspiracy to commit assassination in the hits on E-Moneybags and another rapper, allegedly paying $50,000 per hit. Subsequently, I began serving my life sentence at ADX Florence, a federal supermax prison in Colorado, before being transferred to USP Lee in Virginia. As of 2021, I'm housed at USP McCreary in Kentucky. Despite spending 16 years behind bars, my legacy as a dominant force in the dope world lives on in the streets of New York City. The money, power, and respect I and my team commanded inspired a generation of hip-hop artists like LL Cool J and Nas. However, I've come to realize that the street life exacts a heavy toll. And my ultimate goal was always to leave it behind. As I said in the documentary, Supreme Team, released in 2022, something always seems to drag you back in. For me, it was the culmination of my life choices.